Namaste and Jai Hind. As we speak on this edition of Viewpoint, it is estimated that nearly 1 million people in China are getting affected by the China virus or COVID-19 every single day. Reports suggest that conservative estimates indicate nearly 5,000 virus-related deaths are occurring on a daily basis. But the Chinese authorities are mum. Their reports and claims do not match the horrid scenes on ground. As many as 5 big provinces of China are in the grip of the virus, and this is nearly 3 years since the outbreak in Wuhan, ladies and gentlemen. Now, sample this. China estimates almost 37 million people got infected on a single day this week, as per a Bloomberg report. Now, as per the current estimates, as many as 248 million people, or nearly 18% of the population of China itself, likely got infected due to the virus in the first 20 days of December. Now, from the delayed and incorrect reporting of the actual outbreak in September 2019, keeping facts from the WHO till around the 20th of Jan 2020, not reporting active COVID-19 cases like other nations, it's substandard vaccines, vaccine nationalism, using vaccines to further the CCP's hegemonistic agenda and trying to bully smaller nations who are caught in its debt trap diplomacy, to the flawed zero COVID policy with the Chinese people. Xi Jinping and CCP-led China are guilty on multiple counts, and it's high time the world holds them accountable for the damage they have done to humanity.
This is just one of China's crematoriums. Everywhere you look, there is another body waiting to be cremated. Outside the crematorium are long queues of grieving families with photographs of their deceased. Some have been waiting for days to lay their loved ones to rest. Smoke is constantly billowing from the furnaces as body bags pile up. Visuals of despair are also being witnessed in hospitals as well. Intensive care units are turning away ambulances. Relatives of patients are searching for empty beds. Patients are lying on floors in hospital corridors. Even some of the top hospitals in Beijing have run out of beds and oxygen tanks. What's clear is that COVID-19 is wreaking havoc in the country all over again. According to reports, China is likely to be reporting 37 million cases every single day. 248 million people in China were likely to have been infected in the first 20 days of December. 5,000 people may be dying daily in China in what could be the largest outbreak the world has ever seen. But Xi Jinping is continuing to play hide and seek, just as he has done for the last 3 years. From not revealing the truth about the origin of the virus, to concealing the real number of cases, and now deciding not to publish daily COVID death data. It's been smoke and mirrors right from day one. So is it time for the World Health Organization to hold Xi Jinping accountable?
And here comes the sham lip service. Xi Jinping is urging authorities to take steps to protect lives as China has lifted COVID curbs. This is a flawed policy. You have India on one hand, ladies and gentlemen, with a nation which has similar population as the size as the population of China, look where we are with our vaccine ability and the number of COVID cases and how we have tied over this entire pandemic over the last 3 years. And just look at how Xi Jinping-led CCP has dealt with COVID-19 despite the fact that the outbreak first happened in China. 3 years down the line, Chinese people are suffering, and because of China, CCP and its policies, the whole world is once again in the throes of yet another crisis looming large. The pandemic has had a huge impact on lives, on humanity, but more importantly, geopolitically and in terms of trade, it's also made nations suffer financially, economically. The health of a nation, its people, multiple nations, its people stand on the cusp, and once again, everybody is nervous because of this nation. But has the CCB been held accountable, especially by the WHO and other bodies which should have come down heavily on them? Why have they been allowed to get away so far? Dr. Sanjeev Bagai, Chairman, Nephron Clinic, and he's also part of the advisory bodies advising doctors the world over on how to deal with COVID-19. He's also looking at, he's been with us through the course of the last 3 years, actively looking at various papers on this virus. Somewhere fingers point in a direction where the accountability so far is nil. Andrew KP Leung, International and Independent China Strategist, is also joining us this evening. Professor Madhav Nalapat, Vice Chair, Manipal Advanced Research Group, is with us. And Dr. Amit Gupta, who is with the Oxford University in England, also with us. Let me start with you, Dr. Amit Gupta. Why is this nation and its leadership getting away? 3 years later, they still have not figured out what's the right way to deal with COVID-19. 5 provinces in China are in the throes of huge crisis. Look at the pictures coming in, body bags after body bags. And their authorities are saying there are no deaths. As of 22nd December, they said there are no COVID deaths in China.
I think there are multiple problems in China, which you have alluded to, some of it. I think their strategy initially was to have zero COVID. And unfortunately, that has failed, because to have zero COVID is fine because you can control it to a limit. But with the Omicron, which spreads very widely, when you lift off zero COVID, the virus is letting rip itself inside in the community. So I think they've probably, if they had to, unlock the zero COVID strategy, they could have probably thought about doing it slowly and gradually, as opposed to just a blanket removal. And that's caused the virus to rip throughout the community. The second thing, of course, is their immunization strategy has been very different to the rest of the world. The Sinovac vaccine is actually very effective in 3 doses, but the effectiveness in 2 doses isn't as good as the vaccines that were available in India or the rest of the world, which is also played into why we are having so many reports of deaths from China, because a fair number of their elderly population is still not had the third dose or the 4th dose. So that is also causing a lot of hospitals being, as you say, full. So they've actually managed to create an issue with their communities, which was quite predictable. But I suppose the only way out now for them is to improve the vaccination rates, and also bring back some masking mandates. Apparently, you don't even need to wear a mask in China anymore, because that's not part of the national mandate. So they have gone from total control to zero control, and that's had a devastating impact. I think India is in a very different position.
But Amit, Dr. Amit, this also reflects lack of thought, lack of leadership, and this is absolute harakiri that you're playing with human lives. Now, where is the punishment for this? And 3 years down the line, Sanjeev Bagai, 3 years down the line, China is still not actively reporting the COVID-19 figures. Since February 2020, they have not actively and correctly reported the figures. Their CDC is still giving incorrect data and getting away with it. Their vaccines have proven ineffective, even to the nations that they tried to supply. They used it as part of their wolf warrior diplomacy or comprehensive national power. They used vaccines also to try and bulldoze and bully nations. All of this they're getting away with. Why?
It's difficult for me.
Good evening. So just 3 quick, three quick parts. One is the complete edifice of China's policy and management of COVID has been bizarre, has been unscientific, and completely opaque. And it's really unfortunate that this is now reflecting on millions of patients getting infected and thousands perhaps dying every day. These are preventable deaths. Point number two is their unscientific zero COVID policy, comprehensive province by province, very prolonged lockdowns are causing in fact more mutations. It's called as selective pressure on the virus. The next point really is that the vaccines to begin with were substandard. We know that the vaccine efficacy to begin with, even for the original strain, was nearing about 50 or below par 50. And now with the Omicron, there is a randomized control trial in which they've analyzed 68 studies. They have shown the efficacy dipping down to 12 to 20%. So the vaccines have failed. The population in terms of strategy has been wrong. It is poorly vaccinated, unboosted, sudden lifting of the restrictions, a completely vulnerable population exposed to rampaging Omicron, at least 3 sublineages. I won't go into the details, but we are seeing now deaths. Do we need a World Health Body? Yes. But do we need a World Health Body like WHO in the present form? The answer is resounding no. It's inconceivable to see a body of WHO in which all the nations are contributing to let this kind of evil play out, which is happening from China, in China, and propagating all over the world. We are allowing this virus again to spread. We know that at least 30 to 40% of patients, even to date, can be asymptomatic, paucisymptomatic, or mild infections, subclinical infections. Flights are coming in and out of China. They can again transmit it. Immunocompromised patients can carry it as asymptomatic carriers beyond 100 days. So I think we need to be on guard. India is in a safe zone because the strategy was good, the lockdown was judicious, the vaccines have worked very well, and very important is because of a natural infection or exposure not only to COVID but to other viral infections, there is a concept of developing community-acquired immunity. Coming to holding accountable, I have said this not only on CNN but n amount of platforms. China has to be held accountable financially, ethically, morally, and most important, they have to compensate the world for what they have done. I challenge any person from China, be it in bureaucratic or in the medical circles or in the administrative circles or in the government, to come for an open debate, and they will lose because they have fudged the figures, they have lied to the world, they have not allowed WHO or any other world body to run an independent investigation. After 3 years, the Senate in US ran an independent investigation which actually proved that the virus began there. They have camouflaged, they have fudged, they have lied, they are wrong, and they are suffering for it.
The people who camouflaged and the people who lied are not the ones suffering. It's the common people of China who are suffering, and thousands of deaths which are avoidable are taking place now. 3 years after the vaccine first outbreak happened in Wuhan, and how many lockdowns has Wuhan itself seen, Andrew KP Leung? How would you want to react to this? Shouldn't the CCP and its leadership be held accountable?
Sorry, are you asking me?
Yes, Andrew.
Well, I mean, you didn't address me. Anyway.
I did.
Now,
I didn't know if you didn't hear me. I did.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, there is a great deal of misunderstanding as to what the zero COVID policy is all about. It's not to achieve zero cases in all circumstances, in all places. It's an attempt to ensure earliest possible detection, earliest possible isolation, earliest possible cure, and earliest possible prevention. And at least until January this year, well, this policy has been relatively successful, not according to me, not according to the Chinese Communist Party, but according to an independent research organization called the Edelman Trust Barometer, EDELMAN. Google it, based in New York. And they carry out a survey of all the governments around the world as to to what extent the people support their governments or regard their government's ability to manage the pandemics. China came on top in January this year. So what's happening? Well, what's happening is that the pandemic has been changing like everybody everywhere else, from a pandemic and gradually moving into an endemic kind of situation. Of course, the virus is very infectious. And if people of China, don't forget, China has got 1/5 of mankind on the planet.
So does India, sir. So does India.
So a lot of people are not used to this because they have been used to this compulsory testing. Now they're required to self-test, and the self-tests are mostly not reported. That's why the government cannot rely on any more data. But then the government is still delegating.
How many since? What is since when?
Let me.
Yeah, please complete.
The government is delegating the reporting to a lower level kind of bureau. It doesn't mean that they're not ceasing to reporting. As to how many, well, I mean, this latest statistics you just showed on your screen are generally accurate. Don't forget, you're talking about 1/5 of humanity on the planet. So you divide the number into 1.4 billion people. Well, it's not that alarming. But of course, it's spreading quite rapidly.
Sir, 1 million cases per day is not alarming. 5,000 deaths per day is not alarming. But this was the same China, and it's the same Global Times and Global Times, which was busy lampooning India in the throes of the second wave in 2021. This was the same lot which was trying to tell India that India could not manage COVID-19 1.5 years even before a vaccine had been found. 3 years after globally vaccines have been found, vaccines which are far more effective than Sinovac, the CCP-led leadership which controls all of China, which has got grassroots leadership, has not been able to vaccinate its population completely. The CCP-led Chinese authority and establishment has not come out with the actual numbers of the number of COVID cases since February 2020. You have not accurately reported the data. They hid the outbreak in Wuhan from September 2019 till Jan 20th, 2020. They have not been held accountable for that. Do you want me to list out? It's a litany of errors against humanity that has been committed, and there is no justification. Are you trying to say, Andrew KP Leung, that 3 years after the outbreak of the pandemic, that if you are going to have 1 million cases per day as an outbreak across 5 provinces in China, it's all right? Professor Madhav Nalapat, would you agree with Andrew KP Leung's justification that we have got 1/5 of the world's population, so this outbreak is not a big number?
Well, Anand, I'd like to say that I admire Andrew's ability to defend the Communist Party of China.
After Professor Madhav Nalapat, Andrew, a rebuttal from you. Yes, Madhav Nalapat ji. Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to say that Andrew is in Hong Kong. The per capita income in Hong Kong is way above that of what it is in mainland China. And mainland China had the unadulterated communist system, whereas Hong Kong had a different system till very recently. If Andrew were correct, then people in mainland China would be much richer than people in Hong Kong, which, as I'm sure Andrew also will admit, is not the case. Look, Xi Jinping is the inventor of this total lockdown. Even in the bubonic plague, even in the great flu epidemic of 100 years ago, there was no total lockdown. It killed, I don't know how many lives it saved, but it killed livelihoods, and through that, it has killed lives also. Now, the fact is, the world has understood that. And in India, Prime Minister Modi, we saw in 2021, India was ravaged by COVID-19, which incidentally is a disease where at the worst, about 3% of victims used to die. At the worst. There are diseases where 40%, 60%, 100% of victims die. Here, at the worst, it was 3%. So let's be real. Prime Minister Modi refused to institute a lockdown in 2021, and he refused to institute a vaccine mandate. And today, you look at the situation in India. Despite efforts of spreading panic, it's normal. Look at the situation in China. Is it normal? Streets there are empty. People are afraid to go to work. May I say, Anand, what has happened is not zero COVID. It's zero immunity. The kind of protocols that have been followed by the CCP have made their own people completely immunodeficient and exposed to COVID. That's what happened. in China.
Why did the people come out in massive numbers to protest against this entire zero COVID policy if it was effective? Because it was also mentally affecting the people. Andrew KP Leung wanted to respond, Madhavji. So Andrew, your response, and then I'll bring in Dr. Amit Gupta and Sanjeev Bagai. Yes, Andrew, please.
Well, what's happening now, as I said, as the pandemic is moving into a kind of endemic, and the government is now getting rid of all these strict restrictions and relying on people to self-testing. And then a lot of the cases are relatively mild in comparison to what happened before. Because the fatality rate, even though there is increasing death rate amongst the elderly people, but then the overall fatality rate is nothing compared to what the virus was at the beginning. It's just like many other countries, the pandemic has been changing. But then the population has not been well prepared. And then there is lack of supply of ordinary medicine. And then various local authorities simply do not know how to cope with this huge sudden change. That's what's happening. Now, as regards the overall success of this zero COVID policy, as I said, the Elderman Trust Barometer confirmed in January this year that the Chinese people support best their government in comparison with many other countries, including the United States. As for the general support of Xi Jinping, I mean, all you need to look at is the Harvard Candidate School study last year, looking around the world how people support the government. Again, China came on top, multiple ranks above the United States and many other countries, because the lives of a fifth of mankind has been miraculously changed under the tutelage of the Chinese Communist Party in the past 40 years. So you take that into account. And then because there is a lot of misrepresentation. Now, this is a kind of, a lot of people are in a panic mode, and I expect this situation to continue for the next couple of months.
My simple question to you, Andrew, you made a very strong defense, and I'll ask Dr. Sanjeev Bagai to respond to that. My simple question is, why did the people of China revolt against the government zero COVID policy, and why were there massive protests if all was well? And whose fault is it if the local administration, the provinces, none of them are prepared? This is the same country which was trying to say we will supply PPE kits and testing kits and this to the entire world at a price and at a premium that they could dominate and call. This is the same country which said we have enough and more. And now you're saying its own provinces are ill-equipped and ill-prepared. Whose fault is that then? Please answer. Please think about that. But Sanjeev Bagai, he's quoting Elderman, he's quoting Kennedy, he's quoting a lot of these researchers who have given China's policy the thumbs up. Would you agree, disagree?
Yeah, so I think the Chinese comprehensive failure on all accounts has been thoroughly exposed. I think there is no greater sham than fudging numbers and supplying inaccurate data to get statistics which please the eye. But the fact of the matter is that the people are dying. You can't justify deaths of elderlies and comorbids and unimmunized or partially vaccinated patients for any reason. We are in the third year and we are nowhere close to being endemic. I think the medical science in China needs a comprehensive revamp. They should have got better vaccines. Their vaccine strategy policy should have been better. And more importantly, I think they should realize that whatever they are doing or whatever they have done is nothing related and for their local national health policy. This is nothing to do with China itself. A global pandemic involves and affects all countries all over the world. And I think if China needs to play ball with the world, it has to follow a world order. It's not your way or highway. And I think people worldwide, and I'm very open to say it, are pretty sick and tired of China's policies and China's kind of depiction, which does not portray the truth. So I think there's going to be a time in which Chinese population itself is going to throw out this present regime. It's useless.
Dr. Amit Gupta, would you agree with what Andrew KP Leung has to say that China has got it right all along? Or do the facts and the numbers show the other, a totally different picture? And would you agree if I say that it's high time this leadership is held accountable, not just by its own people, but by the world?
I think I'll stay away from political comment as a clinician because I don't think I have got the knowledge and expertise to comment on a very large program by the Chinese government. But it's fair to say that currently there are lots of patients who are suffering, and it would be good to reflect upon what's happened in the recent weeks. It is true that the containment policy in China was quite successful in the first couple of years, but I think it would do well for the governments to look back at the recent 4 or 5 weeks, whether the lockdown was lifted, it was too quick, whether the vaccination rates could have been better, and whether now wherever we are at this situation, how best can the world support the people to get vaccinated? Perhaps if they would open the doors to the Pfizer vaccine or the other mRNA-based vaccines, that could actually boost up the immunity. Because at the end of the day, Chinese or whatever, it's human beings who are brothers and sisters all over the world. They are suffering, and I think it's important that we have that compassionate view.
No, but as a doctor, as a clinician, you should also ask the question: if isn't it humanity that is suffering? And if it is suffering because of poor inconceived leadership and poor policies and this kind of a tendency where you would want to bulldoze your view rather than understand and go after study, why is it that the 1918 Spanish flu learnings were not implemented by a nation that is claiming 5th of the world's population? These are fair questions to ask. Why would you underreport the deaths? Why would you underreport deaths? Why would you not come out with the actual numbers and keep the entire world in dark and get away with it and try to get away with it?
I think these are all fair questions. The data should be made transparent, and it applies not just to China but to all countries, because as long as we share and we are transparent, it's only then we can learn lessons together. But you're right that people in power should reflect upon how things are done in their country and what the impact they have locally and globally. So I would say
no, because there are nations, Madhav Nalapat ji, in Europe who made the charge of a COVID-19 test, RT-PCR test, as much as €150 just to dissuade people from going ahead and testing. So there are, these are nations which have in the past turned to point a finger at India, wherein the average price of a COVID-19 test was around 800 to 900 rupees for RT-PCR test. That's what. So the irking fact is, this is again China, Global Times. Look at the kind of tone and tenor and language that they tried to use against Bharat in 2021, in 2022.
Well, Anand, I travel a lot, so I test myself every week, and it's about 200 rupees now per test, frankly. And the tests are very, very accurate. They're all made in India. I would like to point out that I think it was in 2002 or 2003, you had SARS-1.
Yeah.
And after some time, Hu Jintao decided to go public with a lot of the facts, etc. And as a consequence, the world was saved. The catastrophe that befell it during SARS-2, because Xi Jinping absolutely declined transparency. And I'm sorry to say, I'm ashamed to say that the WHO basically connived at that lack of transparency, and certain members of the clinical fraternity in the United States, led by Dr. Fauci, became accomplices of China for whatever reason in covering up this Wuhan virus. So these are the facts. And I think it's important for whether it's any scientific individual, any clinician, anybody who's objective, to go by facts and not be afraid of facts, not be ashamed of facts. I want to point out very, very clearly the difference SARS-1 and SARS-2. The world was escaped a catastrophe because, even though a little belated, Hu Jintao went public. Xi Jinping is still now not gone public. Till now, he has not gone public. And as for Andrew, well, as I said, I really admire Andrew for sticking out and going on programs where he knows he's going to be isolated. But I'd like to say, Andrew, Deng Xiaoping, it was Deng Xiaoping, it was Jiang Zemin, it was Hu Jintao who made China prosperous, not Mr. Xi Jinping. Mr. Xi Jinping has reduced the growth rate of China to half of what it was. And China is now on a road to disaster because companies are fleeing China.
Well, we can, Professor Madhav Nalapat, We can question, but the fact is the world has to show the gumption. Starting with WTO and other entities, they have to make China pay and hold this leadership accountable, even for the sake of the Chinese people. Because like I said, they're all part of humanity, this entire one world that we are all a part of. So let's see if that happens, because it's high time it does. I thank you all. Thank you very much. We've just got enough time to put this out for our viewers here on Viewpoint. The Union Minister of Health, Mansukh Mandavia, has interacted with doctors and representatives of the Indian Medical Association. He's urged them to join the fight against COVID-19 by providing accurate information to allay fears and prevent an infodemic. It is important to be on the alert and follow COVID-appropriate behavior, he said, and refrain from spreading unverified information. So he's leaning on the doctors and the medical fraternity to keep the people in India informed. As of now, in Parliament, what he stated is the average number of cases is 153 a day. India is not on the throes of yet another outbreak, nor are we staring at yet another lockdown. But we all need to be cautious and careful and have COVID and maintain COVID-appropriate behavior. With that, we call it a wrap on this edition of Viewpoint. Anusha joins you with the biggest exclusive.